want to go to Meijer?
We can.
You keep saying you need to look or get new shoes.
No, I just meant like I took off my shoes.
Yes, you said you need new shoes.
I know.
Did you want to go to Meijer to look at new shoes?
Later, yes. Not right now.
We can't do it right now because we're in Eagle Creek Park.
I'm going to smack my husband. 71st Street is that way.
Yes, very good.
Oh, we're at 71st or 56th Street.
Yeah. Why would we go to 71st Street?
I don't know, because it's farther away.
You gotta go through the city to get back.
So, what do we get on our way out? Do we get like a lollipop or something? Or,
No.
damn it. COVID lollipops. Come on, get happy.
So, did you want to try walking again or just not?
No.
Let's put extra coating on my dog when it's 90 degrees out.
Excuse me.
Do you want to do anything else?
I don't know. Where else can we drive to?
Anywhere.
I just want to drive.
We could drive to,
Michigan and back. Good.
yeah, we could. They're open.
Damn, she's there. Damn. I really would love to talk to her saying, man, you're amazing. I haven't seen anybody else the same over and over again. Only you. And you're like rocking it today, man. Oh, it's that squirrel again. Ugh.
I don't think we turned down this way before. I think I was waiting till
Oh,
we
this
came
way?
back.
No, we didn't. We were waiting till the end.
Used up 63 miles in gas.
Just for driving here?
No,
Oh.
where I got gas last time.
Oh, it's like, no way.
On the way home on Thursday, I think. Wow.
Yeah, we came down this way. There's a biker that was running this way, I thought. And then we found that one person who went the wrong way.
Oh, yeah. Rain's cleared out quick.
I know.
It hasn't been that long since we've been through here.
Would you ever like to go canoeing or?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Get a canoe, put it in the water, get in.
Well, no, I mean, like, you can go to, like, Turkey Run and, like, rent them.
Go. Life vest. Your own life vest.
I have 2 life vests.
Yeah, those aren't technically flotation devices.
They do float.
They are humongous, but
They're not humongous, thank you.
yeah. Angie, back that up. Not kayaking.
No. That's only one person in a kayak.
Yeah, and you close your legs in. I was watching somebody the other day.
Huh?
On YouTube.
Oh, yeah.